Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy. I'm your host, Paula Jenkins. I invite you to join me as we explore how inspiring people have chosen joy in their lives and what they have to share with us about how to jumpstart joy in the world. Plus, how do we follow our own hearts, find work that lights us up while mindfully noticing the role that joy plays in our own journey. Welcome to episode 90. This is Paula Jenkins, the host of Jumpstart Your Joy. This week, I've got a very special treat for you. It's an interview with best-selling author, psychic, and medium, Paul Selig. And it's all in the celebration of the release of his new book, The Book of Truth. This is the first time I've had someone channel on the show, and I know you're going to love this discussion. It's moving and deeply insightful. The theme for this month on Jumpstart Your Joy is your purpose. And all month, we're looking at all the ways that you can follow your heart and live the life of your dreams, and how to get in touch with your purpose. Before we get on to the show, this week's episode is being brought to you by my Plan Your Podcast free 5-day challenge. This week, I'm leading a 5-day class to help you get in the mindset of starting a podcast. We'll walk through determining your show's name, format, frequency, and what hardware and software you will need. You'll get emails, worksheets to keep, and exclusive podcasts with insider info about how I've created this show, along with access to a private Facebook group where I'll be answering questions and joining you for the duration of the class. You can sign up right now at Jumpstart Your Joy on the homepage. I am so glad that you are here this week. Thank you so much for listening and for joining me. I publish show notes for each episode that will include more information about Paul and his website, additional references, and some of my thoughts on the topics that we're discussing. You can find them for this episode at jumpstartyourjoy.com/episode 90. If you are a long-term listener, welcome back. And if you haven't yet subscribed, be sure and go over to iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Player FM, or TuneIn and subscribe so that you can get these episodes delivered right to your mobile device every Tuesday morning. And while you're there, please leave a review. Now on to the show. Growing up, Paul Selig loved drama and theater and went on to receive his master's degree at Yale University, and then he became a playwright and a professor. In 2009, he had a spiritual experience that led him to become a psychic, channeler, and medium. His work now focuses on being a channel for the guides, and he acts as an amplifier for their spiritual messages and teachings. He's written several books, which are channeled from the guides, and he's just released The Book of Truth, which is the second of a trilogy that started with the Book of Mastery. I have to say, both are outstanding and insightful, and found them to be very hard to put down. What I really love about getting to speak with Paul is his candidness about what it is like to answer his call and find his purpose. Paul and his guides have a lot to say about following your own purpose and rediscovering your truth. And as I mentioned, Paul does channel for just a brief bit of time in this episode when I asked, what do you think the crossroads of joy and purpose look like? And I was really moved by his answer. And so here's my interview with Paul Selig. Today I have Paul Selig on. Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy, Paul.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
The first question that I ask everyone is to tell us a little bit about what you loved most as a child or in school. What were your earliest sparks of joy?
God, when I was a child, it was art, it was drawing, and when I was a little older than that, I guess it was theater, and I guess everything about it. So I was an artsy kid.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I loved the theater as well. And now, of course, you are an author and a medium, and your book, The Book of Truth, is out today. How did you move, though, from being, my understanding is a teacher and a professor, into a spiritual path? What did that look like for you?
Well, it was unplanned, that's for sure. I was a playwright, graduated from Yale when I was 24, I guess. When I was 25, I hit a real wall, and I began to open up spiritually, I think really out of sheer necessity. When, in retrospect, when I was writing plays and I was becoming characters and I was inducing a light trance every time I sat down to work with music, although I was unconscious that that's what I was doing. And in some ways, I think that that was some preparation for channeling the idea of allowing another voice to come through. But really, on a practical level, I ended up having an experience when I was 25 that left me seeing little lights around people. And then I went to an energy healer for a while to begin to understand my own experience of what was beginning to happen to me. And then I finally got up the courage to study healing, and I found that when I had my hands on people, I could hear things for them, which was the beginning of clairaudience, and I was getting accurate information that I had no way of knowing. And I was opening up as a clairsentient and feeling what was going on with people, initially physically and then, emotionally. And now I work sort of telepathically when I read for people in my practice. But it was a process, and I was teaching college for most all of this, really, for 25 years or so. And I was doing a little group in my apartment that met every week, and people were starting to show up to want to talk to my guides, which was the beginning of my practice as an intuitive. But really, this was sort of unplanned, and it just continued to build. And once the book started being dictated through me in 2009, which was when the first book, I Am the Word, was delivered. And these books are all, they're not written. I don't write these books. I sit in a chair, I close my eyes, I speak them. They're recorded and then transcribed, and there's really no editing involved. It's just, this is what came out of my mouth at the time when I was sitting in channel. So once that started to happen, it sort of began to move me out of the life that I had known into the work that I'm doing now full time, which is really, workshops where my guides are coming through and teaching and attuning people to the energy that they work with and bringing these books through.
That's so amazing. So, yeah, and so many questions to follow up there. How does the channeling process work? Maybe that's helpful for people to understand if they're not familiar with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to say that I'm a radio, and we're all radios. We're always in a broadcast. Our broadcast is our consciousness. And with me, when I am working as a channel, I'm a radio for the transmission of my guides. How it feels or how it's happened or my experience of it has changed over the years. But what happens now is I close my eyes. I literally imagine myself turning the steering wheel over of a car and climbing into the back seat, and I'll hear one phrase that is repeated insistently. And it may make no sense to me at all, but I'll hear it and I'll hear it and I'll hear it until I give it voice. And the moment I speak that phrase, everything comes out behind it. And my guides, have been known to lecture for, 40 minutes, an hour, at a time, really without a break, because they're preparing their stuff. And I'm really just sitting there keeping up with it. It's not a very graceful process. If anybody's ever, watched the YouTube videos of me channeling, I whisper, I repeat. Sometimes it's coming a mile a minute. I can barely keep up. Other times it's a little more polite in the transmission, a little easier to listen to. Yeah. But that's the process now. I'm really taking dictation. That's the process of channeling, which is different than when I'm working psychically, which is when I work psychically, I get to interpret information, and I'm in conversation at different levels and unspoken levels with my clients, because they're often telling me what they really need or what's really going on, in a way that the personality self isn't able to. But that's it's different. Then the client is the radio that I am tuning into to hear their broadcast, whereas the guides are essentially playing my radio.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, and if someone's sitting there thinking to themselves, hey, I think I've got some of that in me. Do most people have this as something they could tap into should they choose to do it? Or how have you seen that play out with your own clients?
I think inspiration, certainly, and the ability to know with a capital K
Mm.
what's really true and what one is, accessing at a higher level. I think we're all capable of accessing higher information.
Right.
I don't think that's the issue at all. I do think that channeling is somewhat unique as my experience of it, because my job as a channel is to take dictation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very glamorous. It's almost spoken stenography. And I'm just speaking and repeating and speaking, listening, repeat, listen, repeat. That's really what I do. And I think most of us, when we get information and clear cognizance, which is one of the most effective ways, is just clear knowing. It may come as a feeling, it may come as a voice, it may come, as an idea or a thought that wasn't expected.
Right.
I had to learn over a period of time to discern what was my stuff and what was the guides.
Yeah.
Then that was a process that took some time. But now, as I've gotten used to it, I'm able to recede enough. But I don't think everybody needs to be a channel. I think everybody is inspired and has the access and ability to do that if they want it.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. Yeah. So many more questions right there, more on a personal level. But yeah, like it just seems so interesting when there are those things that seem to come out of nowhere. Are those tend to be your pieces that are probably from a guide?
The pieces that come out of nowhere, I think that, how can I say this? It was funny. This is a dumb one. My father died when I was very, very young, and I decided on his birthday to Google his sister, who's also crossed, to see if there was family information. And I couldn't for the life of me remember her married name, because, she's been gone a long time. Yeah. And I'm looking up this name, and out of the blue, I heard the correct name. I was like typing in the wrong name. I heard like bang, this is the name, and I knew it in every fiber of my being. I'm sure that was somebody, helping me along. And I found this astonishing picture of my father and my sister that I had never seen before, taken when they were children. It was a gift for me on that day. So, it's a funny thing, but I think that we all have this. I think that we can call it our intuitive natures. My guides call it the true self. Right. The true self, they say, always knows, So as we align to our true selves, we have more access to our true knowing and more access to a whole lot of other stuff as well.
Right. And I know in the Book of Truth, you talk about, or the guides explain, how to find the root of what one's true self is. I don't know, what is your take as looking at our truths? How do we discover that? Does it take following a guide, or do some of us show up
God knows.
knowing?
If that was the case, if it was following a guide, nobody would ever get there. Do you know what I mean? Because not all of us are calling ourselves or psychics or intuitives, and nor should we all be. I mean, we all have capacity. But then it would be for the select few. And, the guides that I work with, they're not talking about discovering anything. They're talking about uncovering, really, or revealing what is already true. So the aspect of you that is the guide that the guys would call the true self or the divine self is the eternal self. And what they say is we've gotten sort of stuck in our personalities and sort of assuming that the personality structure, which I guess some people would call the ego, is who we really are, when in fact who we are is something vastly different and vastly more. So the process of claiming the true self is, first of all, understanding that it exists, and that because it exists, it can be known. And as it can be known, it can be claimed as who and what we truly are. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm there yet, and I do this work, and I understand the teachings that come through me, and they make an infuriatingly perfect sense again and again and again. It's very hard to deny what's being taught here. But the idea of I'm going to go find myself assumes that you're not already there. And right. I think that we're already there, but we've just mistaken one part of ourself for the whole thing. And once we start moving beyond the structures and the ways we've self-identified through the systems that we've inherited, who we think we're supposed to be, what it means to be a success, what it means to be spiritual even, some that's just somebody else's idea that we've appropriated and made important. And so once we start moving beyond that, we have access, I think, to more. And the
Yeah.
guys that I work with say, when something is true, it is always true. And
Hmm.
the true self is always there. It's who and what you truly are, like it or not.
Well, and it's interesting because I think my language for it is around, well, it's through the lens of joy. And I'm certain that you and the guides probably have something to say. I know you do from the book, or at least in the mastery book, that joy might not really be the direct destination that we really should be aiming for. But at least for me, it feels like that's the thing that calls me back to remembering who it is that I am at the core. Um, I don't know if you have insights on how you interpret the guides on that, or what they have to say about joy and what our path is.
I don't know that they've talked a lot about it. I know they use the word, so they must. You see, I retain about a third of the stuff that
Interesting.
comes
Okay.
through me.
Mhm.
I'm basically receded when the channelings happen. And while I've learned to interpret the teachings that I hear repetitively, other things I go, well, I know they've talked about it, I just don't remember what they said.
Mm.
So, I'm going to ask them just because I don't know I don't want to screw it up. And if I end up channeling just on this, it's just understand that I whisper and then I repeat. So I'm going to ask them to speak
Thank
about
you.
what joy is in this context. Joy is a ramification of being. Joy is a ramification of being, but in order to be, you have to know who and what you are. You have to know who and what you are. Otherwise, you are caught. Otherwise, you are caught between different ideas of what is needed, what is true, what should or should not be, what should or should not be. The true self who knows who he is. The true self who knows who he is always present, as he be, and as he be, as he is, as what he is, the divine in form as you, the divine in form as you. Joy is a state of expression. Joy is a state of expression. It's something to aspire to. It is not something to be aspired to. If it is to be aspired to, it will remain elusive. It will remain elusive. You'll be chasing that bird. You will be chasing that bird for many, many years, But if your being is in grace, and awareness of union, in its awareness of its union with its source, joy is a constant state of consciousness. Joy is a constant state of consciousness. Now, what do you ascribe as joy? In most cases, is actually happiness. And happiness is not the same as joy. And happiness is not the same as joy. Joy is ecstasy. Joy is ecstasy. It's an ecstatic expression. It's an ecstatic expression of an awareness of all things in light, Happiness in most cases is about comfort, and that is not our teaching. Period.
Mm.
So that's
Thank
their
you.
take on it. Yep.
Oh, thank you, Paul. That's deep and it's moving, and definitely something my soul needed to hear. So thank you. That's
Well,
beautiful.
I'm not the most. I'm not the most cheerful channel on the block some days. So I find it ironic that I get these questions, and the guides are quite happy. I know, so they're happy to take them.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, just interesting that is it hard for you as the human form of Paul to always either receive or understand or express the things that the guides tell you?
Well, not express, because that's my agreement, but if they say something that I can't get behind, I question it. And even in the books, I interrupt the dictation. I say, and the guys will say Paul is interrupting or Paul has a question.
Yes.
And, I don't write these books, but my name is on the cover, and I feel somewhat responsible for the content, only in that if I think it's insane, I'm going to feel really terrible if it's out in the world, and I certainly don't want to be party to deception or to confusion or any of that kind of thing. I mean, we've got enough problems in the world without adding to it.
Yeah.
So my job as the receiver is to be as present as I can and to show up even when I don't want to. That's my part of the deal. How I've integrated this in my life, that's been the challenge. I mean, my life is not what it was even 3 years ago. I left a career I'd had for 25 years.
Yes.
And a kind of comfort of the known. I'm not in the comfort of the known anymore. I'm in the constant state of the unknown. And what is going to happen next? I literally show up every time I channel, which is, a lot these days with
Mhm.
no idea of what's coming out of my mouth. And sometimes
Amazing.
I've got 400 people on a live stream this coming Wednesday night, or more. I don't know how many will be there. And I show up and I close my eyes. I hear one phrase, and then the lecture happens. I
Wow.
sit down to do a book without even knowing what the first chapter is going to be. And whatever comes out of my mouth is the book. The rule has been thus far is that I can't go back and change anything.
Mm.
So I don't. Once they actually said, stop the chapter, we'll start again tomorrow because there was too much noise. Somebody
Yeah.
kept buzzing my buzzer during the channeling, but that's about the extent of it. So
Amazing.
it's a very different way of, it is, and it's challenging for me because,
I bet.
I didn't grow up with religion and I grew up kind of an atheist and, I think I should be, and I think those words that are important are I think and I should, which are both really kind of negatives, farther along than I am, or look different than I do, or should have solved it all by now. But you know what? I'm not a guru. I have no desire to be whatsoever, and I don't consider myself a spiritual teacher. I
Mm.
show up for this work anyway,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's
and
it. That's the job.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting knowing, well, I believe I know that you're a lecturer. And so there's probably a lot of this, and I see this with a lot of like clients or people where it's that they think the path is one thing and maybe their path even has been that thing for a really long time. But then they start to uncover and rediscover and re-engage with who they are. And really, it's a very different person altogether, like whatever the truth is. Is that hard for you as a person, having been in a place where you would have controlled and written a lecture versus now you're the channel for a lecture?
No, that's not hard. And the funny thing is, I was being prepared for the work that I'm doing for years without really knowing it. There was a point, maybe, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, maybe more now, where I would show up at NYU to lecture and I would just refuse to look at my notes.
Mm.
And everything happened in the moment. And I began to love, and I refused to do it after that. I would just show up, and it would just happen. And I
Yeah.
was learning how to trust, I think. And
Yeah.
I have to say I was a very good teacher, and I was
Hmm.
inspired, and I loved every minute of it. And it was different than channeling because I was being Paul, and I wasn't talking in this crazy English accent, and I wasn't whispering and repeating. I was present as me, but it really was, I feel, the most developed and highest part of me that was available for that work and those students. But I
Hmm.
do think it was preparing me for the channeled work. And for all I know, in 10 years, I won't be whispering and repeating. It'll be in my own voice. I have no idea how
Right.
this works or what's going to happen next. Hopefully, if people pay to come see me and I show up, they're going to show up too. Otherwise, it would be a bit of a train wreck. And, I think they know that if that happened, I would never do it again. So they keep showing up with me.
Yeah.
So that's what it looks like today.
That's an amazing amount of trust, I'm sure, that you've put in them that they show up.
It's not so much a trust in them, it's a trust in the it or the event or the phenomena or this
Hmm.
thing that happens. When I channel, and I don't know when this started, but it's being reported pretty much every time I work because I don't see myself when I work. But when I'm channeling and there's a certain attunement my guides do where they get up and they just look at everybody. I mean, it's kind of almost like a darshan. It's an energetic attunement. And, I have, dark hazel eyes. And when I do that, my eyes supposedly are bright blue. I've never seen it.
Wow.
But, but it's reported so many times that I trust the phenomena. I
Yeah.
trust that when the attunements, which are encoded in language, are given in a workshop or on a live stream, we're going to feel it because we do.
Hmm.
And people, I did an event in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and I think there were about 100 people in the theater, and there were maybe 20 of them that had worked with me or knew my work, and everybody else was just there for the show. But the guides attuned the energy and got them all working with it, and, all of these people who perhaps had never felt energy before in their life were feeling it. And to me, that's very exciting,
Hmm.
to be party to that kind of phenomena. I think is kind of great. Do I understand it? No. Do I count on it at this point? Yes. I
Yeah.
have to because it's revealed itself as true so many times.
Yeah. That's wonderful. and interesting that, of course, they would read the room and understand it and bring people into that vibrational energy as well.
Huh. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
what is your take? I mean, my background being, I loved the Old Testament. That was my favorite in studying at Yale. And I was really taken in reading your books that a lot of what the guides say is that I believe the phrase "I am here." And it struck me as I was reading it that that's so similar. It's a little different, but that what Moses says at the burning bush is Hineni, which is Hebrew for "here I am." Do you think is there something in there? Was he in tune with the guides? Is that the same as the Holy Spirit? What is your sense
I
or the
don't
guide's
know.
sense?
I don't know. I mean, the guides say that they've been around a long time, and they, have made a couple of. I felt sort of. I didn't quite know what to make of these remarks, but when they speak about world religions, they say, I've heard, well, we were around for the inception of some of them. I mean, so this is not a new teaching. They say that again and again and again. This is not a new teaching. When something is true, it is always true. And so the I am that I am, and there's a long lineage of that of the I am work in metaphysics. I don't know a lot of it. I know that there were these people in the 30s who were doing I am stuff, and it's been around. It ain't new stuff. But does it begin there? Probably it does. We're the same guys. I'm going to ask, sort of. I get sort of, yes, but how people know, quote unquote, guides, I hear, is different depending on their era. Some of it is their era, their religious background, what they believe in, how God will appear to the atheist. How God will appear to the atheist will be different than the Christian, will be different than the Christian or the Buddha or the Buddhist. Period. That's what I get. So that's interesting, So yes, it's all, finally, I think it's all spirit anyway, and all of the delineations that we make, that's convenient to the times. Do you know what I mean? Or the cultural legacies that we inherit. That much I feel very strongly about. It's all one thing. If we go up higher, we're all the same anyway. Only when we come lower that we're dealing with all this personality crap.
Yes. And like you said, things that are assigned either by where we are born or what our parents said. Or is there anything about your book, or I know you said you have a webinar this week. Do you have other things coming up that people can attend, and where can they find you?
Well, my website is my name. It's Paul Selig, PaulSelig.com. There are a lot of events coming up. I do a live stream seminar almost every Wednesday night. They come in little series, but you can join in at any time. And the guides are teaching and they're taking people's questions, and it's quite wonderful to do this every week because there's a nice community that's built up around the work. But I'm doing workshops all over the U.S. and the U.K., and that schedule is up on my website as well, and that's an opportunity to work with the guides directly. They show up, they attune people, and they teach. And every class is different because they're teaching to different people, and they have different things they want to talk about. And right now, they seem to be preparing for the next book. So the teachings that are coming out are all very new because that's how they get us ready for what's to come next.
Very cool. Thank you. And I will, those links will be in the show notes. How do you maintain harmony in your life? And some people answer that as what does balance look like for you?
Well, I know what it would look like for me if I had it, but I don't have it. Yeah. So I'm not going to pretend that I do. For me, it would be finding a balance between a personal life and a professional life and a spiritual life that is holding all of those things. And also, in my case, because it's overdue, a real awareness of how to balance my physical needs through this work, which is actually very taxing on my body, the channeling. So that, I have ideas, but I'm not, this one I don't, I haven't figured it out yet. And maybe I need to put some more time there.
Yeah, fair enough. And then my last question is, what are 3 ways that you can think of to jumpstart joy in your life, in the world, or in other people's lives?
I think realizing that divine worth is inherent in everybody, that everybody who was born has a right to be here, whether or not we agree with them, that who we are is much greater than who we think we are, And when we diminish somebody else because they're not conforming to who we want them to be, we're diminishing ourselves as well. As my guides say, you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. And even though I struggle with that, I know it to be true. And, you know, as has been said, follow your bliss. That's the gift. That's the gift of being alive. Okay.
Thank you so much, Paul. This has just been a real delight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Paul, thank you so much for this amazing discussion. It's been a true honor and blessing to get to speak with you and to hear from the guides. Thank you for channeling about what joy means. It's definitely a new insight and one that I will hold with me. Thank you so very much. If you want to learn more about Paul or get information about the webinar and streaming events that he hosts, you can find them at paulselig.com, or you can head to my website, where I will have the links to his site and his books, and that is at jumpstartyourjoy.com/episode 90. Remember, if you're thinking about starting a podcast of your very own, be sure and sign up for the 5-day Plan Your Podcast Challenge, which is running this week. You can join up today. We will be working on planning the basis for your show over the next 5 days. It's chock full of so much of what I've learned, and I cannot wait to see you there. So go sign up. Next week on the show, I'll be doing a solo cast all about purpose and finding your purpose. It's my thoughts on a topic that I really love, and I can't wait to share them with you. I hope that you'll come back next week, and until then, I hope that your days are filled with so much joy.